Good evening, and welcome to History for Your Sleep. You're safe here, and you can let your mind settle for a moment. Take a slow, comfortable breath and allow the day to fade gently away. If these calm journeys bring you peace, you may subscribe whenever it feels right, quietly, naturally, without any hurry at all. Now, a gentle story begins. Tonight, we step inside an ancient Roman city, a world of stone streets and narrow alleys, flowing water from fountains and baths, warm lamplight behind shuttered windows, and footsteps echoing softly through the night. A place where daily life unfolded between walls of brick and marble, where voices faded with sunset, and where the city itself slowly breathed as darkness settled in. Let us wander there, slowly, calmly, and let the Roman city reveal itself in the quiet hours of the night. Before the day fully begins, a Roman city feels different. Not silent, not empty, just waiting. But there is one small detail we rarely imagine. Even before voices rise, even before shops open, you can already hear the city working, not with speeches, not with monuments, but with water, with stone, with routines that never truly stop. In the first light of dawn, the streets are already there, stone underfoot, tall walls on either side, and yet the city feels half awake, as if it is holding its breath, waiting for its own noise to return. You approach along one of the main roads leading inward. In many Roman towns, streets followed an organized plan, guiding movement toward shared public spaces. Even where the layout was irregular, the feeling remained the same. This was a city built to be walked, to be supplied, to be used every day by ordinary people. The air at dawn is cooler than expected. Stone still holds the memory of yesterday's heat, but releases it slowly. In warmer months, mornings could feel almost gentle before the sun climbed high enough to sharpen shadows and press warmth back into the streets. And already you can hear water, not rushing like a river, just steady, repeating. Roman cities were supplied by aqueducts, and public fountains were essential, not decorative. For many residents, collecting water was part of the daily routine. Jars were filled, lines formed, conversations stayed quiet and brief. A few early figures move through the space, someone carrying a vessel, someone balancing a basket, someone walking with purpose but without hurry. Most city dwellers did not live in private houses with gardens. Many lived in insulae, multi-story apartment buildings rising above the street. The higher the floor, the smaller and cheaper the rooms often became. Running water was usually available only at street level. Each morning, water had to be carried upward by hand, step after narrow step, floor by floor, every day. As you move deeper into the city, the streets grow tighter. Roman streets were paved with stone and shaped by constant movement. In places like Pompeii, the marks of wheels are still visible, cut into the surface by years of repeated traffic. The street itself recorded the weight of daily life. These streets carried more than footsteps: animals, carts, loads of goods, tools, amphorae. In some cities and periods, wheeled traffic was restricted during daytime hours. Heavy carts moved later in the day or at night. But even now, in the quiet of morning, the stone corridors remember that noise. At crossings, raised stepping stones interrupt the street. They remind you that streets also served as drainage paths. Water and waste moved along the stone surface. The stepping stones allowed pedestrians to cross without standing in runoff, while carefully spaced baps let cartwheels pass through, a solution shaped by long use, not by theory. Some doorways remain closed, others begin to open. Many Roman shops and workshops faced directly onto the street. There were no hidden commercial districts. Work touched the pavement itself. A shutter lifts, dust is swept aside, small goods appear on a counter. A few coins already change hands. And then come the smells. A bakery is awake. Bread was the foundation of urban life. In busy towns and port cities, bakeries operated on a large scale. Mills turned slowly. Some were powered by animals, walking in calm circles, grinding grain into flour through steady motion, not speed. The oven begins to warm thick walls. Smoke clings lightly to the air, and the smell of fresh bread drifts outward, softening the stone world. Nearby, a thermopolium prepares, a street food counter with large jars set into masonry, holding prepared food or drink. In places like Pompeii, dozens of these have been identified, a reminder that many people ate at least some meals outside the home. The city continues to wake, not all at once, but in layers. Water splashing at a fountain, footsteps multiplying on stone, a distant hammer testing its rhythm in a workshop, a voice calling softly, testing the morning. Above the street, behind thin walls, movement begins inside the insulae. Someone shifts on a simple bed. Someone opens a small window. Someone starts the long descent toward the street below. There are no emperors here, no speeches, no marble performances, only a city beginning another ordinary day, crowded, organized, practical, and alive. And as the sun rises higher, the streets will fill. But for now, in this narrow edge of dawn, you can walk slowly, you can listen, and you can let the Roman city reveal itself, one quiet, factual detail at a time. The streets of a Roman city were never meant to be quiet for long. Even after dawn's first calm begins to fade, movement returns. Not suddenly, not violently, but steadily. It fills the narrow corridors between buildings. Roman streets were practical spaces before anything else. They carried people, animals, goods, water, waste, sound, heat, all at the same time, every day. Most streets were paved with stone, not smooth, polished slabs, but uneven surfaces shaped slowly by years of pressure. Feet passed over them constantly. Sandals, bare soles, leather shoes. Hooves struck stone with a dull, familiar rhythm. Wheels followed the same paths again and again, cutting shallow grooves into the pavement. In places like Pompeii, these wheel ruts are still visible, etched into the street like quiet records of repetition. By modern standards, the streets were narrow. Tall buildings rose close on either side, especially in densely populated neighborhoods. This created corridors of sound. Voices carried farther. Footsteps echoed. A single cart could announce itself long before it appeared. Iron fittings rattling against stone, wheels knocking their rhythm into the air. Movement required negotiation. Pedestrians stepped aside for animals. Animals hesitated at crossings. Loads brushed against walls. People learned the habits of their streets the way one learns the habits of weather. Which corners stayed damp, which stones were loose, which passages filled first during busy hours. Street surfaces were not only for walking, they also functioned as drainage channels. Water flowed along them, carrying runoff from fountains, from workshops, from daily use. This is why raised stepping stones appear at intersections in some cities. They allowed people to cross without standing in the wet. At the same time, carefully spaced gaps let cartwheels pass through. A street shared by bodies and vehicles, not separated into clean categories. Signs of organization appeared quietly. Milestones, inscriptions, carved markers. They guided movement and orientation. Even without reading them, people learned where roads led, which directions carried heavier traffic, and where congestion built at certain times of day. The city taught its patterns through use, not explanation. Shops opened directly onto these streets. There was little separation between commercial and public space. A counter faced outward. Goods appeared at the threshold. Tools leaned against doorways. The street became an extension of the workplace. Voices rose as vendors called prices or announced services. Coins clicked softly as hands exchanged payment. Behind these open fronts, workshops worked steadily. Metal rang against metal. Wood was shaped. Leather was cut. Cloth was handled, cleaned, or dyed. Each craft added its own sound and its own smell to the street. Some areas slowly developed stronger sensory identities, depending on which trades clustered nearby. As the day warmed, the air changed. Stone reflected sunlight upward, trapping heat between walls. Shadows narrowed, dust lifted from constant movement. In summer, the streets could feel heavy and enclosed. Early morning and evening offered brief relief. Traffic followed rules, but not silence. In certain periods and cities, wheeled vehicles were restricted during much of the daytime. This limited when carts could move freely. Supply and delivery followed these rhythms. Heavier transport often waited for permitted hours, creating surges of movement later in the day. But even when carts were absent, the streets remained full of human motion. Animals were constant companions: donkeys, mules, dogs. Some were working animals, others stray or semi-owned. They moved through the streets with familiarity, navigating crowds instinctively, adding another layer of movement to an already complex flow. Street life demanded awareness. People watched their footing. They listened for approaching loads. They adjusted their pace to avoid collisions. In narrow sections, a single obstruction could slow everyone behind it. Patience was a daily skill. And yet, there was routine in all this motion. People walked the same routes every day. They passed the same corners. They recognized the same sounds. Over time, constant activity became background rather than disturbance. The street was not chaotic to those who lived within it. It was familiar. As the morning continued, the volume rose. More voices joined. More doors opened. More footsteps layered over one another. The streets filled, not with spectacle, but with repetition. This was the true character of a Roman city, not the silence of monuments, but the steady pressure of ordinary life moving through stone. These streets did not rest. They paused, they thinned, they shifted in tone, but they always returned to motion. And as you continue walking through them, you begin to understand something quietly important. The city was not a collection of buildings. It was a living corridor, shaped by the endless passage of people who used it, wore it down, and depended on it every single day. The movement of the street does not stop at ground level. It rises. Sound climbs the walls just as people do. Voices, footsteps, metal striking stone. The noise of the city does not remain below. It follows the structure of the buildings themselves. Above the street, another layer of the Roman city exists. This is where most people lived. Insulae, the tall apartment buildings of Roman cities, lined many streets and filled entire neighborhoods. From the outside, they appeared solid and uniform, walls rising several stories high. From the inside, they were divided into small rented spaces, stacked one above another, connected by narrow staircases twisting upward into dimmer air. The climb mattered. lower floors were more desirable. They were closer to the street, closer to water sources, easier to reach. Higher floors were cheaper, hotter, harder to live in. The higher you climbed, the smaller the rooms became. Windows shrank, light weakened, air grew heavier. There were no elevators, no shortcuts. Daily life required repeated climbing. Water, collected from public fountains below, had to be carried upward by hand. Jars were lifted carefully, step by step, balancing weight against narrow stairs worn smooth by years of use. Each trip was effort. Each spill meant another descent, another climb. The stairways themselves were tight and dark. They echoed with movement. Footsteps passed close together. Conversations slipped through thin walls. Privacy was limited. Sound traveled easily from one room to another, from one floor to the next. A quarrel below could be heard above. A baby crying upstairs carried downward. Heat rose. In summer, stone walls absorbed warmth during the day and released it slowly at night. Upper floors trapped this heat. Rest became difficult. Windows were often small. Airflow was limited. Smoke from cooking fires drifted upward and lingered. Fire was a constant fear. Insulae were densely packed. Timber, oil lamps, open flames, all part of everyday life. A single accident could spread quickly. Ancient writers criticized the danger of collapse and fire. Over time, regulations were introduced to limit excessive height. Even so, risk remained part of the environment. Rooms were simple. Furniture was minimal. A bed, a chest, a small table. Some spaces served multiple purposes: sleeping, eating, working, depending on the hour. Cooking might be done with a small brazier, or food might be purchased outside. This is why street food mattered. For many residents of insulae, preparing meals at home was inconvenient or unsafe. Thermopolia and nearby vendors offered practical solutions. Eating outside was not a luxury, it was routine. Light inside these rooms was limited. During the day, it entered through small openings. At night, oil lamps provided weak, flickering illumination. Shadows moved constantly across walls. Smoke mixed with warm air. The room never fully escaped the presence of the city outside. From above, the street looked different. Movement below became pattern rather than detail. People passed in steady streams. Sounds blended together. The city felt less chaotic when viewed from a height, but never truly quiet. Insula life required adaptation. People learned when to fetch water, when to descend, when to remain inside. They timed their movements around congestion, heat, and fatigue. Life followed rhythms shaped not by comfort, but by structure. Children grew up inside this environment. They learned the stairways early, which steps creaked, which landings were safest, which corners stayed dark. The building itself became a teacher. Despite the difficulty, insulae were not places of constant misery. They were social. Neighbors knew one another. Walls were thin enough that lives overlapped. Information traveled quickly. Help, when needed, was often close by. The city above the street was crowded, imperfect, and demanding, but it was normal. And while this life rose upward into stacked rooms and narrow stairs, another form of urban life existed at ground level, quieter, more controlled, and carefully separated from the noise outside. To understand that contrast, the city must be entered again. not upward this time, but inward, behind walls designed to keep the street at a distance. The noise of the street does not disappear everywhere, but in some places it is deliberately held back. Behind certain doors, the Roman city changes character. Movement slows, sound softens, the air feels more controlled. This is the world of the domus, the private house of wealthier urban families. It is not built to rise upward like the insulae, it is built to turn inward. From the street, a domus does not announce itself. Exterior walls are often plain. Openings are limited. Windows, if they exist at all, are small and placed high. The goal is not to invite attention, it is to create separation. Passing pedestrians see very little of what lies beyond. Once inside, the contrast becomes clear. The entrance opens into the atrium, a central space designed to bring light into the house. Above, an opening in the roof allows daylight, air, and rain to enter. Below, a shallow basin collects the water. Light reflects softly across stone and plaster. The rhythm here is calmer than the street outside. This space is not empty, it is active, but quietly so. Members of the household move through it every day. Slaves pass with practiced steps. Tasks are completed without unnecessary sound. The house operates as a system. Each person knows their place within it. From the atrium, rooms branch outward. Sleeping spaces, storage rooms, areas for receiving guests. The domus is organized not for crowding, but for control. Movement is guided. Access is managed. Some areas are open to visitors. Others remain strictly private. Further inside, the house opens again, into the peristyle courtyard. Here, columns frame an open garden space. Plants grow in carefully tended beds. Water may move gently through small fountains. Though the city continues only a wall away, it feels distant here. The domus is built around light. Instead of facing outward, it captures daylight from within. Shadows shift slowly across walls. Time itself seems to move at a different pace, less hurried, more deliberate. Daily life follows established patterns. Meals are prepared by household staff. Food arrives from markets and shops, but it is consumed within controlled surroundings. Eating here is not always public. It may be formal, social, ritualized. Religion is present inside the domus as well. Household shrines stand in quiet corners. Small offerings are made regularly to protective spirits. These acts are not dramatic. They are routine, woven into daily behavior, not separated from it. Sound inside a domus is muted. Footsteps are lighter. Voices are measured. Walls absorb noise instead of amplifying it. Compared to the insulae, privacy is greater. Compared to the street, calm is intentional. Yet the domus is not isolated from the city. Business is conducted here. Clients arrive in the morning. Social relationships are maintained. News travels inward. The household depends on the same systems as everyone else. Water from aqueducts, food from markets, labor from the city. Slaves form the invisible foundation of this life. They clean, cook, carry, maintain, serve. Their movement keeps the house functioning. Their presence is constant, even when unnoticed. Without them, the domus could not operate as designed. Children grow up within these walls. They learn hierarchy early. They observe formal interactions. They experience the city not through noise and congestion, but through enclosure and control. Their understanding of Rome is shaped by inward space rather than exposure. At the edges of the house, the city presses close. Footsteps pass, voices rise and fade, carts move. Life continues, but architecture filters it, allowing only what is necessary to enter. The domus represents one side of Roman urban life. It is not the norm for most residents. It is the exception. But it reveals something essential. The Roman city was not experienced the same way by everyone. Architecture shaped daily reality as much as wealth or law. Some lived stacked above the street, carrying water upward, listening through thin walls. Others lived inward, surrounded by light, order, and separation. Both existed side by side, and between them flowed the systems that made the city function: water, food, labor, and time, connecting every doorway, no matter how quietly it tried to close itself off from the street. The walls of the domus can hold the city at a distance, but they cannot separate it from one essential thing: water. No matter where a person lived, high above the street in an insula or behind inward-facing walls, daily life depended on the steady movement of water through the city. It arrived quietly, it traveled invisibly for long distances, and it revealed itself most clearly at public fountains. Aqueducts fed Roman cities from far beyond their walls. Water moved along carefully engineered channels, following shallow gradients across valleys and hills. By the time it reached the city, it was already part of a controlled system, directed into distribution points that fed neighborhoods, baths, workshops, and public spaces. Within the city, water became visible again, at fountains. They stood at intersections, along streets, near markets, and beside public buildings. Their presence was constant. Their sound, steady, repeating, never hurried, became part of the city's background. For many residents, the fountain marked the beginning of the day. People arrived with jars, buckets, and vessels of all sizes. They waited their turn. They filled containers carefully, mindful of spills, mindful of weight. Water had to be carried, sometimes only a short distance, sometimes up long flights of stairs. This daily effort shaped routines. Fetching water was not occasional. It was repeated again and again, woven into the structure of the day. Morning was the most common time. The air was cooler, the work was easier, crowds were lighter, the rhythm was familiar. Not everyone had equal access. While fountains were public, some households, especially wealthier ones, had private connections. Pipes carried water directly into certain buildings. They fed basins, gardens, and baths. These privileges were controlled and regulated, creating visible differences in daily convenience. For those without them, the fountain remained essential. It was not only a utility, it was also a social point. People recognized one another. Short exchanges happened naturally. News traveled in fragments. The fountain gathered the neighborhood briefly and then released it again as people returned to their tasks. Water also fed industry. Workshops depended on it for cleaning, processing, and production. Fullers required water to wash and treat cloth. Dyers needed it to prepare fibers and rinse color. Bakers used it for dough. Potters relied on it to shape clay. The city's crafts could not function without a steady supply. This created a layered soundscape: water splashing into stone basins, jars clinking, overflow running into channels, distant echoes as water moved through pipes and drains. Streets often carried this runoff. Stone pavements doubled as channels, guiding excess water away. This is why streets could remain wet even in dry weather. And this is why raised stepping stones mattered so much. They were not decorative, they were practical, responses to a city where water was always present. The system was efficient, but not clean by modern standards. Sewers existed, but they were not sealed. Smells rose from drains. Water carried waste along the same surfaces people crossed every day. The city accepted this mixture as normal. Water also shaped time. Certain tasks could only be done when water was available. Certain workshops were busiest at particular hours. Fountains slowed as containers filled, then emptied again as crowds thinned. Even inside private houses, water marked the day. Rain fell through roof openings into basins. Courtyard fountains added sound and movement. Gardens were tended with care.
These features reflected status, but they also echoed the same dependence felt across the city. Bathhouses drew enormous volumes. They required constant supply, heating, and circulation. Their demand shaped distribution priorities. The presence of baths redirected water flow across entire neighborhoods, binding hygiene and social life directly to infrastructure. At night, the sound of water did not stop. Fountains continued to run, pipes continued to carry flow. Even when streets emptied and lamps dimmed, the city's water system remained awake. It was one of the few sounds that never paused. In this way, water connected every part of Roman urban life: the insulae, the domus, the street, the workshop, the bath. It moved quietly through them all, supporting routines that rarely drew attention yet could never be ignored. And as water flowed outward into streets and basins, another daily necessity followed a similar path, one that shaped schedules, labor, and survival just as deeply: food. Water flows through the city quietly. It supports every routine, but it is not the only substance that must arrive reliably each day. Food follows its own paths. In a Roman city, survival did not depend on occasional abundance, but on constant supply. Among all foods, bread stood above the rest. It was not a luxury, not a treat. It was a foundation. For many people, it formed the center of the daily diet, shaping schedules, labor, and movement from early morning onward. Bakeries began working before the city fully woke. Their presence was easy to detect. Even from a distance, the smell of warming grain and rising dough drifted into the streets. Ovens were large and permanent, built of stone, designed to hold heat for long periods. Once fired, they could serve many customers in succession. Behind this smell, the work was steady and physical. Grain arrived in sacks or containers, often from storage spaces or nearby warehouses. Before baking could begin, it had to be ground into flour. In many cities, this grinding happened in dedicated spaces, sometimes directly connected to bakeries. Stone mills turned slowly. Some were powered by human strength, others by animals, walking in circles, repeating the same motion hour after hour. This movement was not hurried. The animals followed worn paths. The millstones rotated at a consistent pace. Flour collected gradually. The rhythm was predictable, almost mechanical, long before machines existed to replace it. Inside these spaces, sound was constant. Stone against stone, hooves against floor, voices coordinating simple tasks. It was work designed for endurance, not speed. Once ground, the flour moved to the next stage. Water was added, dough was mixed by hand, portions were shaped carefully, sometimes marked to identify individual loaves. In some cities, bread was baked for private customers. In others, it was produced at larger scale to meet heavy demand. Port cities and densely populated areas required especially dependable output. The heat inside bakeries was intense. Ovens radiated warmth into enclosed rooms. Smoke clung to ceilings. Air grew thicker as the day progressed. Workers adapted. They learned to move efficiently, conserving strength,
timing tasks around heat and fatigue. Bread did not wait. It was expected, daily, reliable. Once baked, loaves moved outward. Some were sold directly from the bakery entrance, others were distributed through nearby shops or food counters. In Rome itself, grain distribution programs supported citizens, adding another layer to the city's food system. But beyond official measures, the everyday bread economy was immense. This created predictable morning movement. People passed bakeries on their routes, they stopped briefly, coins changed hands, loaves were tucked under arms or into baskets. The smell followed them into side streets and stairways. For residents of Insulae, bread solved a problem. Cooking inside small rooms was inconvenient and risky. Fire added danger. Space was limited. Buying prepared food reduced effort and hazard. Bread, purchased fresh, became the most efficient solution. Street food counters supported this system. Thermopolia offered prepared dishes and drinks, but bread remained the constant companion. It could be eaten alone, dipped, shared, or carried away. Its simplicity made it universal. The bread economy also supported other trades: millstone makers, oven builders, grain merchants, transport workers. Each relied on the others. A disruption in one place affected many. Storage mattered. Grain had to be kept dry and secure. Flour had to be protected from pests. Bread had to be sold quickly. The city balanced these needs through a network of spaces that rarely attracted attention, yet supported daily survival. Smell played a role in orientation. Even without signs, people knew where bakeries were. Warm grain and smoke marked them clearly. These scents blended with others, leather, metal, water, but remained distinctive. As the morning advanced, bakeries reached peak activity. Later, production slowed. Heat lingered. Workers rested. By afternoon, many loaves were already gone, absorbed into the city's endless consumption. Bread did not symbolize celebration. It symbolized continuity. Every day the same effort. Every day the same need. Every day the same quiet pressure to produce enough. And while bread filled hands and stomachs, it also pushed people outward again, toward streets, shops, and small transactions that defined everyday exchange. From ovens and mills, the city flowed naturally towards its next layer of life: commerce.
Bread moves easily through the city. It is carried in baskets, tucked under arms, passed from hand to hand, but it is only one part of a much larger pattern. Roman urban life depended on constant small exchanges. The city was not sustained by rare large purchases. It was sustained by countless minor transactions repeated every single day. A coin here, a portion there, a service exchanged, a favor returned. These moments filled the streets as reliably as footsteps. Many shops opened directly onto the street. Their boundaries were simple: a wide doorway, a stone counter, wooden shutters that lifted in the morning and closed again at night. Inside, space was limited. Storage, tools, and goods competed for room. The street itself became an extension of the shop. Vendors stood close to passers-by. There was little distance between seller and buyer. Conversations were brief. Prices were known. Haggling happened, but within familiar limits. The rhythm was efficient, shaped by repetition rather than negotiation. Thermopolia played a central role in this economy. These street food counters were designed for speed and convenience. Large ceramic jars were set directly into masonry counters, holding prepared foods or liquids. People stopped only briefly. They ate standing, they moved on. There was no expectation of comfort. The value lay in availability. Food was practical, not ceremonial. Stews, bread, wine, simple dishes. They passed quickly from hand to mouth. Eating happened in public view, woven into movement, not separated from it. For many residents, especially those living in Insulae, this was the most sensible way to eat. Shops offered more than food: cloth,
tools, oil lamps, ceramics, small household goods. Items were chosen for durability and necessity. Decoration existed, but utility dominated. The city rewarded what could be used every day. Coins moved constantly. Bronze and copper changed hands more often than silver. Transactions were small but frequent. The sound of metal touching stone or wood became part of the street's background. Work and commerce blended together. A shopkeeper might also be a craftsman. A family member might assist. Slaves often handled sales, while owners managed supply. There was no strict separation between production and retail. Making and selling often happened in the same space. This created a visible work rhythm: hands measuring, hands cutting, hands passing goods across counters. The pace was steady, rarely rushed, rarely idle. Street life rewarded familiarity. Regular customers were recognized. Credit might be extended briefly. Trust formed through repetition, not contracts. The street itself acted as witness, reinforcing behavior through visibility. Children participated early. They ran errands, carried messages, helped with simple tasks. Urban life trained them through observation and imitation. By watching exchanges, they learned value, timing, and negotiation without formal instruction. Noise accompanied commerce. Voices rose slightly above the street's general sound. Vendors called out, customers responded, conversations overlapped. The effect was not chaos, but layered activity. Smells marked different areas: fresh bread near bakeries, strong fish sauce near certain stalls, oil and smoke near lamp sellers. The city could be navigated by scent as much as by sight. As the day progressed, patterns shifted. Morning favored necessities. Midday brought heavier crowds. Later hours slowed trade as heat increased. Shops adapted. Shutters opened and closed to control exposure to sun and fatigue. Despite the energy, these exchanges were not dramatic. They were ordinary. A city of this size required predictability. People relied on knowing where to go, what to expect, and how long tasks would take. The success of Roman urban life depended on this reliability. Commerce did not dominate the city, it supported it. Behind each transaction stood a larger system: workshops producing goods, warehouses storing supplies, transport moving materials. But at street level, all that complexity condensed into brief moments: a coin, a loaf, a bowl of food. And once these needs were met, people moved on, towards workshops, towards baths, towards homes, carrying with them the quiet proof that the city was functioning as it should. Beyond the counters and shutters, deeper rhythms continued to shape urban life, driven not by selling, but by making.
Behind the counters and brief exchanges of the street, another layer of the Roman city works continuously. It is less visible at first glance, but it is impossible to miss for long. Sound gives it away. From open doorways and shaded interiors come steady rhythms: hammer striking metal, wood being shaped, stone scraped, cloth worked by repeated motion. These are the sounds of production, and they fill the city from morning until evening. Roman cities were cities of work. Workshops were woven directly into residential and commercial streets. There were no distant industrial zones set apart from daily life. Crafts existed where people lived, walked, and bought food. The city did not separate making from living. Many workshops were small: a single room, a wide doorway, tools arranged close at hand. Space was used carefully. Every surface mattered. Walls bore marks of use. Floors showed wear from repeated movement. Some trades left especially strong impressions. Fullers worked with cloth, cleaning and treating garments in dedicated spaces. Their workshops required water, basins, and constant footwork. Cloth was trodden underfoot, rinsed, and prepared for reuse. The process produced strong smells and damp air, creating sensory zones that residents quickly learned to recognize. Dyeing added color and intensity.
Vats held liquids that transformed pale fabric into deeper shades. Heat, water, and chemicals combined slowly. The work demanded patience. The result was valuable. Clothing was expensive. Maintaining it mattered. Potters shaped the city's containers. Clay was everywhere, in bowls, jars, oil lamps, roof tiles, pipes, and storage vessels. Workshops handled wet clay, dried forms, and finished products at different stages. Kilns, where present, required fuel and careful placement. Smoke and heat followed their cycles. Metal workers added sharper sounds. Bronze and iron were worked into tools, fittings, nails, and household objects. Hammering echoed into the street, announcing activity even when the doorway remained shaded. Sparks flashed briefly. Heat radiated outward. Leather workers contributed their own textures. Hides were cut, shaped, and prepared into shoes, straps, and coverings. The smell was distinctive. The work demanded strength and skill, turning raw material into everyday necessity. Glass workers, where present, handled fragile material. Glass had become widespread in Roman life. Vessels, small containers, and decorative elements passed through skilled hands. Heat and precision defined the craft. Mistakes shattered quickly. These workshops were not silent places of solitary genius. They often involved multiple people. Tasks were divided. One person prepared material, another shaped it, another finished or sold it. Slaves frequently provided labor. Skilled workers supervised or specialized. This created internal rhythms, repetition, coordination, familiar movements performed hundreds of times. Work was learned through observation. Skills passed from hand to hand, not from written instruction. The street absorbed all of this. Sound spilled outward. Smells drifted. Passers-by slowed briefly, glanced inside, then continued. Workshops were part of the city's awareness, even for those who never entered. Some trades clustered naturally. Water-dependent crafts appeared near fountains or reliable supply. Heavier production gravitated towards areas with easier access to transport. Over time, neighborhoods developed distinct identities based on what was made there. Work defined daily schedules. Morning favored preparation. Midday focused on steady production. Later hours slowed as heat and fatigue increased. Shutters might be adjusted. Tasks simplified. Tools set aside gradually. The city tolerated this noise. In fact, it depended on it. Without constant production, shops would empty. Containers would disappear. Tools would wear out. Urban life required constant replacement and repair. Workshops ensured continuity. Children grew up watching this work. They learned trades by standing nearby. They absorbed rhythms without formal lessons. Skill was part of the environment, not an abstract concept. Despite the physical effort, there was familiarity in these spaces. Workers knew their tools. They knew their customers. They knew the limits of their strength and the pace they could sustain. The city rewarded consistency more than speed. By late afternoon, the sounds softened. Hammers slowed, basins emptied, fires were reduced. Finished goods were stacked or carried away. The air retained traces of the day's labor: dust, smoke, heat. The workshops had done their part. They had transformed raw material into usable form, quietly supporting every other aspect of urban life. And as production eased, attention shifted again, away from making towards gathering, movement, and the shared spaces that pulled the city together once more. The sounds of workshops soften as the day moves forward, but the work of the city does not slow. It simply shifts location. Beyond the small shops and street-facing crafts lies another layer of Roman urban life, less visible, less personal, but just as essential. This is the infrastructure that keeps the city supplied. Markets, storage spaces, ports, and the quiet systems that move goods from arrival to consumption. Markets were not occasional events, they were permanent features of the city. Some were large and centralized, others smaller, embedded within neighborhoods. They gathered sellers, buyers, and goods into predictable patterns of movement. The McKellum, the covered market, offered order. Stalls were arranged carefully. Stone counters defined space. Meat, fish, vegetables, and other foods were displayed openly. The structure controlled flow, smell, and interaction, creating a contained environment for trade that differed from the open street. Here, buying was slower, inspection mattered, quality was judged, conversation lingered slightly longer. The market balanced openness with regulation. Beyond food, markets connected to storage. Goods did not appear magically each morning. They arrived from outside the city, often in large quantities, and had to be held securely until needed. This is where horea, warehouses, played their role. Horea were solid buildings, thick walls, limited openings, carefully managed interiors. They stored grain, oil, wine, and other bulk goods. Some featured raised floors to reduce damp. Others held massive storage jars embedded into the ground, capable of holding enormous volumes. Inside these spaces, the air was different, cooler, heavier, filled with the smell of grain dust, oil residue, rope, and stone. Work here was methodical, counting, stacking, sealing, recording. The movement was quieter than in workshops, but no less deliberate. Ports extended the city outward. In river cities and coastal towns, docks formed crucial entry points. Ships arrived carrying amphora filled with wine, oil, fish sauce, and other products. Cargo was unloaded piece by piece, transferred onto carts or carried by hand. Labels mattered. Painted markings on amphora identified contents, origin, and sometimes producer. These details allowed goods to be tracked and recognized, even by ordinary buyers who became familiar with certain names or qualities. The port was not calm. It was crowded, noisy, physical. Ropes strained, wood creaked, voices coordinated movement. Animals waited nearby. The smell of water mixed with that of cargo. From port to warehouse, from warehouse to market, from market to shop, goods flowed inward. This movement followed routines shaped by experience. Routes were known, timing was practiced, disruptions were costly. Much of this labor was invisible to the average resident. People saw bread on counters and oil in lamps, not the storage rooms that protected grain from moisture, or the docks where amphora were lifted and counted. Yet the reliability of daily life depended on these unseen efforts. Infrastructure also shaped space. Markets created gathering points. Warehouses defined districts. Ports influenced road placement. The city's physical layout reflected the needs of supply long before aesthetic concerns. Security mattered. Stored goods attracted theft. Doors were locked. Guards were assigned. Access was controlled. The city invested in protection, not only for people, but for resources. Time was carefully managed. Deliveries arrived early. Markets peaked at certain hours. Storage activity adjusted to heat and demand. The city learned when to move and when to wait. Despite the scale, this system was not mechanical. It relied on human judgment, on memory, on habit, on people knowing where things belonged and how quickly they moved. Failures happened, delays, shortages, spoilage. When they did, the effects spread quickly through the city. A missing shipment could be felt in shops, kitchens, and homes. When it worked, it went unnoticed. That was its success. As afternoon approached, markets thinned. Goods were sold or returned to storage. Ports quieted slightly. The heaviest labor had passed. What remained was distribution. objects now embedded in daily life. Oil burned in lamps, bread filled baskets, tools rested in workshops. The city absorbed what infrastructure provided and prepared for the next phase of the day. As goods settled into place, attention turned away from supply toward the shared spaces where Romans paused, gathered, and allowed the body to rest. Places shaped not by storage or work, but by habit, routine, and social presence.
As goods settle into homes, shops, and workshops, another presence continues quietly through the city. It does not announce itself with sermons or dramatic moments. It does not interrupt. It simply exists alongside everything else. Religion in a Roman city was not separate from daily life. It did not demand withdrawal. It did not require special timing. Instead, it was woven into routine, appearing in small actions, repeated so often they became habit, not spectacle. It began at home. Inside both insulae and domus, household shrines stood in modest corners, not grand spaces, a niche in the wall, a small shelf, a painted figure. Offerings were simple: food, drink, incense. They were given briefly, often without pause, as part of the day's rhythm. These acts were practical. They acknowledged protective spirits associated with the household. They asked not for miracles, but for continuity, safety, stability, order. The expectation was not transformation, it was balance. Religion also appeared at thresholds. Doorways carried meaning. Crossings were moments of awareness, leaving the house, entering the street, beginning work. Each could be marked quietly: a small gesture, a brief pause. Outside, temples rose above surrounding buildings. They dominated public space visually, but they did not overwhelm daily life. People passed them constantly, without stopping. Worship was not continuous. It followed calendars, festivals, and specific needs. Temples structured the city. They marked centers, defined routes, anchored open spaces. Markets, forums, and streets often aligned around them. Even when inactive, they shaped movement, simply by existing. Rituals occurred regularly. Festivals interrupted routines. Processions moved through streets. Shops closed temporarily. Work paused. These moments reminded the city of shared identity, but only for a time. Once finished, life resumed its usual pace. Religion was not abstract. It was visible in objects: amulets worn on the body, small statues placed near workspaces, inscriptions carved into stone. These items blended belief with daily function. Omens mattered. People watched signs, unusual events, animal behavior, unexpected occurrences. Interpretation followed tradition. Decisions might be delayed or adjusted. This did not create constant anxiety, but awareness. The city paid attention to its environment. Public rituals involved specialists. Priests performed ceremonies. Officials supervised offerings. These roles were recognized, but they did not separate priests from ordinary life. They were citizens first, ritual leaders second. In workshops and markets, religion did not halt activity. A brief gesture before work, a small offering nearby, then production continued. Belief did not replace labor, it accompanied it. Even baths carried ritual traces. Though primarily social and hygienic spaces, bath complexes often stood near temples or incorporated decorative references to gods. The body was cared for, but not detached from belief. Religion also shaped time. Certain days favored particular actions. Certain moments were avoided. Calendars mattered, but they did not dominate. Most days passed without notable ritual, guided instead by habit. This balance defined Roman urban religion: constant but quiet,
present but not overwhelming, structured but flexible. For most people, belief was not emotional. It was a framework, one that explained order, reinforced tradition, supported continuity. Children learned it early. They watched adults perform small acts. They absorbed gestures without instruction. Religion entered their understanding of the city naturally, as part of how things were done. At the same time, disbelief was not publicly emphasized. The city did not reward open challenge to tradition. Participation mattered more than conviction. Performing the act was often more important than private belief. As the afternoon advanced, temples stood unchanged. Shadows shifted across columns. Offerings accumulated. Passers-by glanced briefly, then moved on. The gods remained present, without demanding attention. Religion did not pull people away from the city. It anchored them within it. And as the day continued, another space began to draw people together, not for belief, not for work, but for rest, conversation, and the shared experience of the body itself. Places where water, heat, and routine met in one of the city's most distinctive institutions.
As belief settles quietly into habit and routine, the Roman city offers another space where daily life gathers. This time, not around work, not around trade, around the body. Few institutions were as central to urban Roman life as the public baths. They were not rare visits, not special occasions. For many residents, bathing was a regular habit, woven into the rhythm of the day as naturally as eating or walking the streets. The approach to a bath complex was unmistakable: large walls, wide entrances, constant movement. People arrived throughout the afternoon carrying small personal items, greeting acquaintances, or simply following familiar routines. The baths were not private retreats. They were communal spaces, designed for shared use. Inside, the atmosphere changed. The air grew warmer. Sound echoed differently. Stone floors held heat beneath bare feet. Voices blended together, softened by steam and distance. The city felt temporarily contained within walls built to absorb it. Bathing followed an order. Visitors moved through a sequence of rooms: undressing areas, warm spaces, hot rooms, cold pools. The progression was familiar. No instructions were needed. The body learned the route through repetition. Water was everywhere, pooled, flowing, steaming. It arrived through the same infrastructure that fed fountains and houses, but here it was consumed in enormous volumes. Heating systems warmed floors and walls. Fires burned continuously to maintain temperature. The baths depended on constant coordination between water and fuel. Bathing was not rushed. Time stretched inside these spaces. People lingered, they talked, they rested. The city's urgency softened into conversation and routine motion. The baths offered pause, without stillness. Social boundaries blurred here. Wealth mattered less. Status softened. People of different backgrounds shared the same rooms, the same water, the same heat. Differences remained visible, but they were temporarily secondary. Conversation filled the air. News was exchanged. Opinions shared. Gossip passed easily from one voice to another. Information moved through the baths efficiently, carried by bodies moving slowly through space. Work did not disappear. Some people conducted business here. Agreements were discussed casually. Relationships were reinforced. The baths supported social life in ways no other urban space could. Cleanliness mattered, but not in modern terms. Soap was not used as it is today. Oils were applied to the skin and scraped away. Dirt was removed through heat, water, and repeated motion. The goal was refreshment, not sterility. The sensory experience defined the space: warm stone underfoot, steam rising slowly,
echoes bouncing off curved surfaces, water splashing gently into pools. The baths created their own rhythm, distinct from the street, but still unmistakably urban. Children sometimes accompanied adults. They learned the routines early. They observed social behavior. They absorbed the unspoken rules of shared space. The baths became part of their understanding of the city. For those living in insulae, the baths were especially important. Private washing facilities were limited. Space was scarce. The baths provided access to warmth, water, and comfort, otherwise unavailable at home. They balanced inequality without eliminating it. As evening approached, the atmosphere shifted. Light entering through high openings softened. Shadows lengthened. The busiest hours passed. Movement slowed slightly. The baths began to release people back into the city. Bodies emerged relaxed, voices quieter, steps slower. The street felt different after bathing, less sharp, less urgent. The baths did not isolate people from the city, they prepared them to return to it. In this way, the baths acted as the city's shared living room, a place where private bodies became public without exposure, where rest existed without withdrawal. They reminded residents that urban life was not only pressure and motion, it was also repetition, warmth, and shared presence. And as people left the baths and stepped back onto stone streets, the day moved gently toward its next phase. Light would soften further, shadows would stretch, movement would slow. The city would not sleep yet, but it would begin to change. Leaving the baths, the city feels slightly slower, but it does not become quiet. Instead, attention shifts. Among the adults moving through streets and doorways, another presence remains constant and easily overlooked. Children are everywhere in a Roman city. They do not occupy separate spaces. They do not wait for adulthood to enter urban life. They grow up inside it, learning the city by moving through it day after day. Childhood here is not sheltered. Children wake to the same sounds as everyone else: footsteps on stone, voices rising below windows, water splashing at fountains. The city teaches them early what belongs where and how movement works. They learn streets before letters. Paths become familiar through repetition. Children know shortcuts, corners, crossings. They recognize which streets are busiest and which remain calmer. They learn to step aside for animals, to watch for carts, to judge when it is safe to cross. Much of their learning happens through errands. A child sent to fetch water learns weight and balance. A child sent to buy bread learns value, timing, exchange. Coins are counted, instructions remembered, mistakes corrected. Work enters early. In many households, children help where they can. They assist in shops, carry tools, clean spaces, watch over younger siblings. These tasks are not framed as training. They are simply part of daily necessity. Formal schooling exists, but it is limited. Some children attend basic lessons, learning letters, numbers, recitation. Education is uneven and depends heavily on family means. Many children receive only brief instruction. Some receive none. Their primary education comes from observation. Workshops function as classrooms. A child standing nearby watches hands move. They learn how cloth is handled, how clay responds, how metal changes under force. Skills are absorbed slowly, through exposure, not explanation. The city provides constant demonstration. Markets show exchange. Baths show social behavior. Streets show negotiation and patience. Children imitate what they see. Play exists, but it shares space with work. Children invent games with stones, sticks, simple objects. They play in courtyards, near doorways, along quieter streets. Play is brief, adaptable, easily interrupted by errands or responsibilities. Noise does not separate adult and child worlds. Children grow accustomed to sound. They learn to speak over it, to move through it, to rest within it. Silence is not expected. It is rare. Family structure shapes experience. In Insuli, space is limited. Children share rooms. Privacy is minimal. Life is communal by necessity. In Domus households, children encounter hierarchy earlier, observing distinctions between family members, clients, and slaves. Slaves themselves play roles in childhood. Some care for children. Others work alongside them. Relationships form through proximity rather than status. Children learn social boundaries through lived experience, not instruction. Risk is part of learning. Streets are uneven. Fires occur. Accidents happen. Children learn caution early, guided by warning and imitation, not protective barriers. Despite this, childhood is not uniformly harsh. Children belong to the city. They are recognized. They are expected to participate. Their presence is normal, not disruptive. As they grow older, roles solidify. Some move fully into trades. Others continue limited schooling. Paths diverge, but all are shaped by the same urban environment. The city leaves marks. It teaches endurance, adaptability, awareness. Children learn how to exist among others without constant instruction. By late afternoon, children's movement changes. Errands slow. Play fades. Families regroup. Evening routines begin to take shape. Children drift indoors or closer to home. Doorways fill briefly. Voices soften. Lamps are prepared. Those who have learned the city well carry that knowledge forward. They become workers, vendors, parents, elders, moving through the same streets, repeating the same routines, teaching the next generation without formal lessons. As children disappear gradually from the streets, the city's energy shifts again. Light lowers, shadows lengthen, sound begins to thin. The Roman city turns slowly toward evening.
As children retreat toward doorways and interior spaces, the Roman city begins to change its tone. Nothing stops suddenly. Instead, movement thins. The sun lowers. Light shifts across stone surfaces that have absorbed heat all day. Walls glow briefly, then darken. Shadows stretch longer along streets, softening sharp outlines and reducing detail. The city does not sleep yet, but it prepares. Shops begin to close. Wooden shutters descend slowly, one after another. Counters are cleared. Unsold goods are pulled inside. The rhythm of trade slows, as necessity gives way to rest. Coins change hands less often. Conversations shorten. Workshops quiet gradually. Hammers strike less frequently. Fires are reduced. Tools are set aside. The sounds that dominated the day fade into background hum. What remains is the echo of movement, rather than movement itself. The streets remain active, but differently. Footsteps become more deliberate. Routes shorten. People walk with purpose, heading toward homes, baths, or evening meals. The density of traffic decreases, creating more space between bodies. Light becomes selective. Oil lamps are prepared and lit in doorways and interiors. Their glow is weak and localized, forming small islands of visibility rather than continuous illumination. Shadows gather between them.
The street no longer reads as a whole, but as fragments. Smells change with the hour. Cooking scents rise from homes and street food counters. Smoke drifts upward. The sharp smells of production soften, replaced with warmth and familiarity. Food marks the transition from work to rest. The air cools. Stone releases heat slowly, radiating warmth back into the streets. In summer, this offers relief. In cooler seasons, it signals the need for enclosure. People adjust clothing, pace, and destination accordingly. Evening brings a narrowing of activity. Fewer errands, fewer exchanges, less noise, but not silence. Conversation continues, especially near homes and gathering points. Voices lower naturally, not by rule, but by shared awareness of the hour. The city's social map tightens. People remain closer to familiar spaces. Distance becomes less appealing. Darkness introduces uncertainty, and caution shapes movement. Animals respond as well. Dogs become more noticeable, their presence felt through sound and movement. Other animals settle. The street feels less predictable, even without obvious danger. Public spaces empty unevenly. Some areas remain active longer, near food sources, baths, or busy crossings. Others fall quiet early. The city becomes patchwork, active in one place, still in another. Light reflects differently now. Marble surfaces catch lamp glow briefly. Stone absorbs it. The effect is softer, less reflective than daylight. Forms blur at the edges. The city feels older, heavier, more inward. For those returning home, evening routines take over. Water is used sparingly, food is shared, lamps are placed carefully to reduce risk, doors are secured. Life compresses into interior spaces. In insulae, sound travels upward again. Voices pass through thin walls. Movement on stairways continues as residents settle in. The day's final trips up and down occur, carrying food, water, or messages. In Damis households, the transition is quieter. Courtyards darken gradually. Lamps are positioned to preserve light without exposing interiors to the street. The boundary between public and private strengthens. Evening reminds the city of its limits. Vision narrows, movement slows, awareness sharpens. People measure distance more carefully. The street is no longer a place to linger. As daylight fades completely, the city does not disappear. It contracts. Life gathers inward, behind walls and shutters, while the streets remain as channels of reduced motion and heightened attention. This is the hour when familiarity matters most. Knowing routes, knowing neighbors, knowing when to stop moving. The Roman city, shaped by repetition and habit, prepares for its most uncertain phase, not through fear, but through routine. Lamps glow faintly, footsteps thin further, the air cools. Night approaches, bringing with it risks the city understands well.
But night fully settles over the Roman city. It does not arrive dramatically. It arrives by subtraction. Light fades. Movement thins. Sound becomes sharper because there is less of it. The streets are no longer places of routine. They become spaces to pass through carefully or avoid altogether. Darkness reshapes the city, revealing its limits more clearly than daylight ever does. Artificial light is weak. Oil lamps provide small pools of visibility, nothing more. They flicker in doorways, windows, and intersections, but they do not connect. Large areas of the street remain unlit. Shadows dominate. Details disappear. This changes how people move. Steps become measured. Routes shorten. Familiar paths are favored over speed. The city rewards memory at night, knowing where stones are uneven, where streets narrow suddenly, where obstacles appear without warning.
Fire becomes the greatest fear. Open flames are everywhere. Lamps, hearths, braziers. Buildings stand close together. Upper floors of insulae trap heat and smoke. A single mistake can spread quickly through tightly packed structures. Buckets and basic tools are kept ready. People listen for alarms. They watch for unusual light or smoke. Awareness replaces confidence. The city responds to this risk. Night watchmen patrol certain areas. Their presence is limited, but symbolic. They listen, they observe, they respond when needed. Their footsteps become part of the night soundscape, reassuring and unsettling at the same time. Crime is feared, but not constant. Darkness creates uncertainty more than danger. Theft, accidents, disorder, all are possible, but most people rely on avoidance rather than confrontation. Staying inside is the safest choice. Dogs become more audible. Their barking punctuates the night, responding to unfamiliar movement or sound. They mark territory in ways lamps cannot. Their presence reminds residents that the city is still alive, even when quiet. In insulae, night is shared. Thin walls carry sound easily. A cough, a whispered conversation, a child stirring, all travel upward and sideways. Privacy is limited. Sleep is layered, interrupted and adaptive. People rest when they can. The concept of uninterrupted sleep is rare. The city's noise never fully disappears. Residents awake, adjust, and return to rest, guided by fatigue rather than clocks. In domus households, night feels more contained. Walls insulate sound. Courtyards hold darkness quietly. Lamps are placed carefully to avoid attention. The separation from the street is strongest at night. Doors are secured, bars are set, shutters are closed. Entry becomes intentional rather than casual. The city's openness contracts into defensible spaces. Movement outside is purposeful. Those who walk at night do so for a reason, a message, a duty, a patrol. Casual wandering is rare. The street belongs briefly to necessity rather than habit. The soundscape changes again. Distant footsteps echo louder. A dropped object carries far. Silence itself becomes noticeable, broken only by occasional voices or the rustle of animals. Despite this, night is not panic, it is caution. The city has learned to exist within darkness. People adapt. They trust routine more than vigilance. They know when to remain still. By the late hours, movement reaches its lowest point. Lamps burn low, fires are reduced. The city settles into shallow rest, never fully unconscious, never fully awake. Stone releases the last of the day's warmth. Air cools. The Roman city, built for daylight activity, accepts night as a period of limitation rather than opportunity. And yet, even in darkness, continuity remains. Water still flows. Structures still hold. Lives pause without ending. The city waits, not for danger, but for return. Soon, light will begin to thin the darkness again, and with it, the city's rhythm will quietly resume. As night deepens and the last lamps burn low, the Roman city does not feel finished. It feels paused. The streets lie mostly empty now. Stone that absorbed heat all day releases it slowly into the cooler air. Walls hold warmth. Courtyards rest in shadow. The city exhales, not dramatically, but patiently, as if this moment has happened thousands of times before, because it has. Nothing here was built for a single day. The streets were shaped by repeated footsteps. The walls rose from habits of shelter. The routines formed not from theory, but from use. Life inside a Roman city was not defined by rare events or great names. It was defined by continuity, by mornings that always returned, by work that never fully ended, by water that flowed, whether noticed or not. People lived close together, not by choice, but by structure. They learned to share sound, space, and time. They adapted. They repeated. They endured. Above the street, in insulae, rooms remain dark and quiet now. Bodies rest in narrow spaces, surrounded by walls that remember the day's noise. Breath slows. Sleep comes in layers, light and interrupted, shaped by the city's constant presence. Behind inward-facing walls, domus courtyards hold stillness. Lamps glow faintly, gardens fade into shadow. Order remains, even at rest, maintained by architecture and habit. Elsewhere, fountains continue to run. Their sound is softer now, but unchanged. Water moves through channels carved long ago, indifferent to hour or attention. It will be there again at dawn, ready to begin the same quiet work. Workshops stand silent. Tools rest where they were set down. Floors bear marks of use. The air still holds traces of heat, dust, and effort. Tomorrow, hands will return to these spaces and repeat movements learned long ago. Markets wait. Counters are empty. Storage rooms remain full. Goods rest in darkness, counted and sealed. Supply does not vanish at night, it simply waits. Temples stand unchanged, their columns catch moonlight briefly. Offerings remain undisturbed. Belief does not demand activity, it persists through presence alone. The baths lie quiet now. Steam has faded. Voices are gone. Stone retains warmth beneath the surface. The space that held bodies and conversation earlier rests, ready to welcome the city again when the sun returns. Children sleep. Tomorrow, they will run the same streets, learn the same shortcuts, carry the same errands. The city will teach them again, not with words, but with repetition. Nothing here aims for perfection. Life inside the Roman city was crowded, loud, unequal, often uncomfortable. Yet it functioned. It continued. It shaped people who learned to live within limits rather than escape them. That is what remains most striking. Not the monuments, not the power, but the ordinary success of a city that worked day after day through habit rather than spectacle. And in this quiet moment, when movement has slowed to its minimum, the city feels almost familiar. Stone holds warmth the way modern walls do. Water sounds the way it still does at night. People rest, trusting that morning will return, because it always has. Soon, light will touch the streets again. Footsteps will return. Shutters will lift. Another ordinary day will begin, shaped by the same systems, the same spaces, the same quiet logic that once supported millions of lives. For now, the city rests, and as it does, you can rest too. The streets are calm, the work is paused, the noise has softened. You are safe to let the day fade. Thank you for walking slowly through the Roman city. May your night be calm, your thoughts gentle, and your sleep as steady as the city waiting for dawn. Good night.